The sun is setting over the river. It's a beautiful red glow, and on the other side I can see the comforting glow and occasional twinkles of houses on the other side, and the purple lights from the hotel we once stayed at. And it's beautiful. I'll never get tired of this view. But this evening, as I sit here, it feels different. I have an ache. I have a real sadness. I have thought long and hard about doing a video with this topic. I know it's emotive, it's controversial, and no doubt it will be met with comments. Oh, thank you, Rosie. I've lost where I was now. My cat's just jumped onto the sofa. If it looked like there was an earthquake going on, that was the kitten. But as I was saying, I know that what I say will be met with all kinds of responses: angry, furious, perhaps abusive. But I've decided to take the risk and talk about how I feel about what my country has voted for. Probably from a self-indulgent reason, in that I have so much turmoil inside me and disappointment. I'm hoping that airing my views, in addition to Facebook, of course, and Twitter, will be quite cathartic. And I suppose there's a part of me hoping that there will be a lot of people who feel the same as I do. I know there are. The Brexit result, the EU referendum, was very, very close. It was in no way a majority. No way a landslide. It was a majority, but not a particularly strong one. And absolutely, it's right that as more people in Britain want to leave the EU, it is right that this is what should happen. It really hurts me and pains me to say it. But I'm not one of these people who thinks it will claim that it was an unfair contest, an unfair vote, because it wasn't. The people have spoken, as it were, and although the end result does not in any way represent me and my values and what I feel is important, nor many of my friends and co-workers and family and many other people, it is of course the views of enough people, and that is sometimes enough. So Brexit. I'm not very good at political debates. I have a lot of gut instincts, and I have a strong sense of social justice. In some ways my views are probably a bit too lefty extreme for a lot of people. In some ways, not in every aspect, but in terms of free movement, human rights, fairness, equality, it breaks my heart when I see social injustice being done. My views on the result is that it was the wrong vote. I feel that it was a short-sighted reaction against the government. I in no way support our current government, and I never thought I would be siding with David Cameron on anything. But I have, passionately, because the alternative is so much worse, and that alternative will play out now for generations to come. I am very concerned about the future of the UK. I am concerned about the opportunities that are lost for the next generation. I'm concerned about employment and the jobs market and the economy. I'm concerned about the NHS. Above all, I'm concerned that as so much of the Leave campaign was about immigration, and it really felt it was a vote for hate and intolerance and xenophobia and bigotry. Nigel Farage's poster, where he's standing there with a line of refugees behind him, that was inflammatory. That was about hate. There's nothing else you can describe it as. I feel very saddened, frustrated and uncomfortable with the knee-jerk reaction and the all too common reaction of my fellow Brits towards people who are not British, people who are from another country, have a different skin colour, from a different religion, different culture, that they are inherently somehow not to be trusted, dodgy, scroungers. I don't subscribe to that view in any shape or form. I actually feel that immigration really benefits us as an economy. I think it's important in any country, in any town, in any city to have a diverse demographic of people from all walks of life. I don't think it's healthy or healthy in all forms of the word, or the right thing for it to be one particular race, one particular nationality. And that's surely ridiculous in such a multicultural global society as we live in, especially with the internet, where connected every which way. I do feel that the Leave vote was all about immigration, and I believe from reading comments and reading reading articles that made me feel very uncomfortable, that the assumption is that as soon as the new day dawned after the referendum, people who weren't British would be deported, which sounds ridiculous saying that out loud. But I think a lot of people hoped that would happen, which horrifies me. It horrifies me because I do not understand how I can't even find the words. I do not understand how someone can think in those terms. Has history taught us nothing? It's been such a cliche to use phrases such as, it must not happen again. And that's why history is so important. But this is the start, I think. I really fear it is a green light now for open racism and xenophobia. It's become acceptable to say to another human being, I won't swear, but to say to another human being, go back to your own country, we don't want you. A wonderful friend of mine, an Italian friend, was told the day of the referendum she was with a little boy in a soft play centre, and a lady walked up to her out of the blue. She'd obviously heard her speak in Italian to her little boy, and this lady said to my friend, "At least after tomorrow you lot will all be gone." I cannot fathom how that must have felt for my friend. I just know how it made me feel for her. I had no words of comfort to offer her. I really do hope I'm wrong and that this will not be a can of worms. But there's more to this than the immigration issue, of course. It is inevitable that Scotland will have another referendum and they will leave. It will be inevitable that it will leave us in such political turmoil. And now the reins of power has been handed from one, in my opinion, unpleasant man to someone far more dangerous. Boris Johnson has created for himself a buffoon persona, which I believe is more dangerous than anything, almost like a wolf in sheep's clothing. People like him, people think he's funny, he's a joke, someone you'd have a laugh with down the pub. This is not true. He's a deeply unpleasant person. A lot of the Eurosceptics' opinions, a lot of the myths that have been bantered around have stemmed from when Boris Johnson was a journalist writing for the Telegraph, and the majority of his Eurosceptic style comments, opinion pieces, columns were based entirely on lies. The most famous of which is when he wrote some rubbish about the EU banning grocers from selling bananas in bunches of more than 3, which is ridiculous. You only need to go into any supermarket and see that's not true. But that's the sort of thing that people have believed, and it is why that he was sacked from that paper. But that's not remembered now. His opinion pieces and articles and columns have become fact, have become part of, have played a huge part in rhetoric behind the campaign. The other thing that I think is truly wicked was the lies that were bandied around about NHS being safer outside of the EU. Actually, the NHS is being disbanded and is no more safer. Thanks to Cameron and the privatisation. But actually, being within the EU, we had more of a chance of some aspects of the NHS being salvaged, of being propped up by the hundreds and thousands and millions and billions of medical professions from Europe who come over to the UK and work their socks off in hospitals, in medical centres, in GP practices, and instead they are met with contempt and disgust from people who want them to go. Because walk into any NHS hospital and it is a mix of staff from all over the world doing their absolute best in hospitals which have been run down to the ground on purpose by Cameron's administration. They have been drastically underfunded so that Cameron and the Health Secretary can say, see, they're awful. The NHS doesn't work. We have no choice but to hand them over to private companies. And that is what's happening. So the most horrific lie told, in my opinion, was that £350 million would be spent if we left the EU and spent on the NHS. And the very next morning afterwards, Farage is interviewed. He then backtracks and says the 350 million figure was a mistake. I cannot tell you how that made my blood boil. What cynicism. What an absolute despicable man. How does he sleep at night? The people who voted leave have well and truly been shafted. I know this will be met with so many counter comments, and it's right and fair that everyone has their own opinion, and if someone wants to vote leave, of course they should. But for my part, I do not in any shape or form think it was the right decision for our country. For so many reasons. I've only touched on a few here. And therefore, I would like to reach out specifically to any listeners, viewers I suppose, who are part of the EU, are part of Europe, and apologise for what my country has done. Apologise for us behaving like a petulant child. It is almost like we've cut off our nose to spite our face. We want to do things on our own, to be independent, because we're proud to be British, we're proud to be English, etc., etc. We don't need any foreigners. That's what it feels like. I love the diversity of where I live. I'd hate to think that it will not be the same anymore. And no, it won't. It certainly won't. There will be no free movement. The pound has already crashed. People who are living in the UK who are from Germany, France, Italy, Romania, Bulgaria, must be feeling truly terrified, not only of their future here, but of people's reaction to them now. Because I think what has happened is really dangerous, and I'm very concerned. You only need to look at the horrific, devastating death of Labour MP Joe Fox. Can't even say it right, I'm so upset. Joe Cox. And yet, compare the reaction of people to her killer, to the killing of drummer Lee Rigby by that Muslim guy who is black. People automatically shouted terrorism, which in this case was true, but why is this not terrorism? Because the man who killed Joe Cox was white. Is that not terrorism? He's white, therefore he can't possibly be a terrorist. He has mental health problems. Her death was the result of this hatred which has been stirred up. Which is why Farage's comment this morning about where he said we have won and not a single bullet has been fired was just sickening and disrespectful, because a bullet was fired and a wonderful woman lost her life and 2 children have lost their mother. I would like to share something with you. It goes somewhere to summing up how I feel. A quick note on the first 3 tragedies. Firstly, it was the working classes who voted for us to leave because they were economically disregarded, and it is they who will suffer the most in the short term from the dearth of jobs and investment. They have merely swapped one distant and unreachable elite for another one. Secondly, the younger generation has lost the right to live and work in 27 other countries. We will never know the full extent of the lost opportunities, friendships, marriages and experience we will be denied. Freedom of movement was taken away by our parents, uncles and grandparents in a parting blow to a generation that was already drowning in the depths of our predecessors. Thirdly, and perhaps most significantly, we now live in a post-factual democracy. When the facts met the myths, they were as useless as bullets bouncing off the bodies of aliens in an H.G. Wells novel. When Michael Gove said, "The British people are sick of experts," he was right. But can anybody tell me the last time a prevailing culture of anti-intellectualism has led to anything other than bigotry? And I think on that note, I will leave it there and bid you all farewell. And a personal, heartfelt apology from Britain to the rest of the world, especially Europe.